Welcome to another video on the channel, and today we're going to be talking all about the easiest rig that you can make as a beginner carp angler. When it comes to carp fishing then, I would say that the fish don't really care what rod you're using, what reels you're using, what bags you've got, what tackle. All they care about is what happens on the last 2 to 3 feet of the fishing line itself. Okay, so what rig you're using, what leader you're using, what hook you're using, and what bait you're using, and how that's presented. What I will say is, even though this is a beginner rig, this is still a rig that I use today. Many of the reasons being is that there are so many different rigs available now. You've got the Ronnie rig, you've got blowback rig, you know, slip Ds, multi-rigs, German, the list goes on. However, this is probably the most basic and can often give the fish the most difficult time when dealing with your bait. The rig I'm talking about is a simple hair rig. Now, this can be used in conjunction with many different baits, and you can adjust this depending on what you're fishing for. So size of fish, you know, what the lake bed is, lots of different factors and how you can modify this rig itself, okay? But it is simple, and it only requires 2 items, and that is a braid of your choice, okay, so an uncoated braid of your choice, the hook pattern of your choice. This is a curved shank that I'm using today, and a bait, okay. So with this, for the purposes of the video, I'm going to be attaching a couple of bits of pop-up sweet corn, okay, but realistically I'd be using bottom baits with this rig, okay. This is predominantly going to be a bottom bait rig, and a rig that can be used on a clean bottom or a silty bottom, depending on what your lead setup is, okay. However, I'd be fishing this with, you know, maybe a drop-off setup in line. I'd use this rig in the margins predominantly, not really casting that far, you know, showing fish, feeding in the margins, then definitely be dropping this on the reds and seeing what happens from there. So yeah, for the purpose of this then, I will be using some pop-up sweet corn, just so you can see whereabouts the hook bait is in relation to the hook, and what it looks like if you were to put a boilie on there, for example. The length of hook link material then that you're going to need for this rig depends on what you're fishing over and how you're fishing it, okay. If you're fishing this on a solid bag, for example, which it's really effective for, then 3 to 4 inches, no more than that. However, if you are fishing this on a river, for example, you may want 10, 15 inches, okay. So it all depends on what you're fishing in, okay. So for this rig then, we're going to take probably take maybe 8 to 10 inches of hook link material, snip that off. So this is going to be our working material. So in one end, all we're going to do is we're just going to tie a double overhand knot. Okay, do that, thread that through like so. Make sure you moisten down all of your knots. Stops the material from getting warm and potentially breaking or weakening in that hook link. So we'll snip off our excess, and there we have one loop. Okay, so once we have our knot in our line, this one's going to be used for mounting our hook baits. So what we need to do now is we need to grab the other end of the line that doesn't have a knot in it, and all we're going to do is thread this end through the hook eye itself. The way that we do that is that we thread it through the back of the hook, so away from the point. So we're putting it through the hook towards the point. Okay, so we'll pull that through like so, and then what we should have now is the loop on the back of the hook. So now that we have our hook, it's time to set the length of the hair that we need, okay. So for me, it's going to be probably maybe 3/4 of an inch above the curve in the hook, okay. So something along that length, you see that. And then all we're going to do is going to knotless knot this. Now, for those of you who don't know how to knotless knot, all we're going to do is we're going to hold the length of the hair that we need, okay, in place, and then we're going to hold that on the back of the hook. And then all we're going to do is we're going to simply whip this up, okay? So we're going to go over the hair and the hook, trapping it. And we're going to go across between 5 and 8 times, okay? Once we've got to the end, we're going to go back down twice. This locks it all in place. And then we're going to hold it. And then all we're going to do is we're going to thread our tag end through the back of the hook. Always better to wet this. And then you can thread it through like so. So we thread that, and then we're going to pull it until it locks in place like so. So from there then, you can tighten everything up, and that is what it's going to look like. So as you can see, we've got our hair, we've got our hook. So once we have our hook attached to our length of material, and we've knotless knotted that down, and we're happy with how tight it is, and we're happy with the neatness of it, okay, all we're going to do at the other end then is create another loop. Okay, so this will be a figure of 8 loop, it's much stronger, and this is going to dictate how long our rig is. Okay, so once I'm happy with how long my rig's going to be, I'm going to simply do a figure of 8 knot. These are much stronger than a regular knot, and I've never had any breaks so far. So we now have our figure of 8 loop knot in the end. Okay, now it's important, if you're not using quick change swivels on your rigs, okay, on the other end for the leader and the lead arrangement, then what I'd recommend doing is making this loop on the other end of the rig slightly bigger, so that we're able to thread the hook and the hair and everything through onto that, so that it then becomes quick change for you on the bank. Okay, I use quick change swivels, always have done. I just think they're much easier. Okay, so we've done our figure of 8 knot then. All we're going to do is we've tightened down all of our knots. We're just going to trim off our tag ends. And that is essentially the rig done. The only thing we need to do now is to mount our bait. So when it comes to mounting the bait then, it doesn't really matter what you put on this bait, on this rig. What I will say is try and avoid pop-up baits, okay? Like I say, I am using pop-up sweet corn, but this is simply because I don't want to use any boilies on this today. I would be using a bottom bait, however, if I was to use this. But occasionally I do use sinking corn as well. So what we need to do then is get our bait on our baiting needle. And then all we're going to do is grab the hair and thread our bait onto it. Okay. Once we're happy with that, all we need to do then is put one of our bait stops on. Thread that on there like so, and then pull the baits towards it, so locking them baits in place like so. There we have it. Our hook is attached to our line and our bait is attached to our hair. This becomes extremely difficult for fish to deal with, and it is very, very, very simple to make. So we'll recap what we need then. Obviously you need a bait, you'll need a braid, uncoated braid of your choice, a pair of scissors and a baiting needle, and obviously a hook. So that is, in a nutshell, the simplest carp fishing rig that you can make to catch fish, and I still use it today. Okay, so don't rule it out even if you're an experienced angler.